Welcome to the Survivor to Thriver show with your happiness expert, Samia Bano. Do you feel stuck, silent, and stressed? Is something hurting your heart and soul? Are you burning yourself out? If so, you are in the right place because this is the podcast people from all over the world join in to learn exactly how to stop suffering and start living with inner peace and joy. Let's get started. Hey, I'm very happy that you've joined me for today's show because you have something very, very important to talk about. We're almost to the end of October, but it's still October. And if you didn't know, October, among other things, is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And that is an extremely important issue for us to address at this show because if we want to truly be able to stop suffering in our lives, to start living with inner peace and joy, if you want to more than just survive, if you really want to thrive in our lives, then it's absolutely critical that we have healthy relationships and that we have loving relationships that are full of kindness and compassion and empathy and respect for each other. And domestic violence is the very antithesis of that. Domestic violence refers to the violence, the abuse that occurs in our relationships, most specifically in our intimate partner relationships with our spouses, with our girlfriends, with our boyfriends. And these relationships, because they are so intimate, because there's so much of our time and energy that is invested into creating them, into maintaining them. The quality of these relationships is hugely impactful on our ability to live with inner peace and joy and happiness. So if you are in an abusive relationship and you're not happy, let me tell you, your problem isn't that you don't know how to be happy. The problem is you are in an abusive relationship. And until the nature of your relationship changes, you will continue to struggle to be happy. Now, even if you're somebody who is not in an abusive relationship right now, even if you're somebody who is actually in a very healthy, happy relationship right now, you still need to be aware of the issues around domestic violence, because even though you yourself are not personally involved in an abusive, violent relationship, there are people around you who are. There are people that you know who are. Even if you don't know, you know those people, okay? Even if you don't know who they are, you know them. Because the statistics say that as many as 1 out of every 10 relationships, intimate partner relationships, are abusive. And the 10% is, by the way, a very conservative estimate. Because the vast majority of cases of abuse and in relationships, intimate partner relationships, they go unreported and actually even undiagnosed. Because most people, when they think of domestic violence, when they think of abuse or abusive relationships, their imagination, their understanding of what abuse is sort of limited to physical abuse. So if somebody is not being beaten up, is not being left bloodied and bruised, or with broken bones and things like that, if they are not having like physical violence being directed at them, then people believe that they're not being abused. The people in these relationships themselves oftentimes do not identify as being abused or suffering from violent, abusive behavior if they're not being physically abused. This is not uncommon at all. I've seen this happen again and again and again and again in my line of work. That the person who's being abused themselves does not recognize, does not realize that what they're experiencing is abuse, because it's not gotten to the point where it's become physical. But the fact of the matter is that mental, emotional abuse is just as real as physical abuse, and it's just as hurtful. In fact, I would argue that it is even more hurtful than physical abuse, because physical injuries can be healed relatively quickly. You may have a few scars, but they can stop hurting over time. Somebody breaks your bone, you can mend your bone, and after a while it can stop hurting and you can move on with your life and regain your physical functionality, except of course in some of the most extreme cases. But unfortunately, the mental and emotional aspects of the abuse, they stay with you and they continue to impact your everyday life. And there are means of manipulation and for the abuser to exercise power and control over you, even in the absence of any kind of physical violence. And I can tell you that healing from the mental emotional aspects of abuse is extremely, extremely challenging, right? And sometimes it is really healing from these mental emotional scars that takes people a lifetime to heal from, if they're ever able to heal from it. Whereas with the physical injuries, people are able to recover from them relatively quickly. So it is extremely important that we learn to recognize what mental and emotional abuse is and learn how to resist it effectively. And by resist, I mean counteract it, protect ourselves from it, and ideally to be able to transform it into something positive, to be able to remove the presence of it from our lives. And even if we are not plagued by this directly ourselves, we need to be aware of these things so that we can help our loved ones, our friends, our families who are suffering from these issues effectively. It happens, it's like so often that survivors, victims will reach out to their friends, their families, even to like perhaps the priests at their church or the imams in their mosque, the leaders in their communities that they trust to guide them, to help them, protect them, serve them, or even sometimes reach out to law enforcement. And what do they meet with? They meet with disbelief, like people will not believe what they're saying. because people don't understand the dynamics of violent relationships, abusive relationships. People don't understand. Like I said, one of the things is like if you're not being beaten, people do not believe that you're being abused. But that's just one thing that happens. Another reason why oftentimes survivors are not believed is because the abusers present, even though they're so abusive in their intimate partner relationships, to the wider community, they project very respectable, even charming images of who they are, what their relationships are like. And because they're so good at creating and maintaining these false images of respectability and just creating this charming persona, people are not willing to believe that a person so respectable, so charming, so seemingly good could be violent and abusive towards their partners. It's like really, really sad. Because charming does not equal good. And that is a deliberate tactic, deliberate strategy, deliberate technique that is being used by the abusers in order to enable them to keep abusing within their intimate partner relationships behind those closed doors. If you don't know what the reality is, if you believe in the myths, then you cannot help and support the people who reach out to you for help effectively. Another really big problem that survivors and victims face when they try to reach out for help is that because of the ignorance of the issues, the people that they reach out to give them advice, give them suggestions for how to deal with what they're going through. That advice, unfortunately, is ineffective, unhelpful, and oftentimes downright harmful. And you don't even realize it, but you're giving that victim of abuse advice and suggestions that are actually going to cause more harm for them. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's say your friend comes and tells you about the trouble they're having in their relationship. They tell you that their partner is really horrible to them. They may even come out and admit that their partner is abusive towards them, that maybe they're even physically abusive towards them, and they're like, what should I do? How can I want to mend my relationship. I want to make things better. How can I deal with this? And your instinctive reaction and advice to your friend, because you love them, you care about them, maybe to tell your friend to leave their abusive partner. And you insist and encourage them with everything that you have, and maybe even apply certain pressures that you're able to apply to have your friend leave their abusive partner, like to break off the relationship. But you don't really know what you're doing in terms of understanding the dynamics of abusive relationships, the psychology of abusers, how they might react in situations. And even if your friend tells you that she's afraid, she cannot leave, she gives you various reasons for why she's afraid she cannot leave, you sort of in your wanting to help your friend, you say, no, it's fine, we'll do this, we'll do that. You really do the best you can. You give your best help, best suggestions to help your friend leave the abusive relationship. And let's say you're successful, your friend leaves the abusive relationship, and then you find out that unfortunately things become worse. Things take a turn for the worse now that your friend has left the abusive relationship. And it's something that takes you by surprise, takes your friend also to some extent perhaps, but less than you, by surprise. And you find yourselves in even more trouble, like having, as they say, dropped from the frying pan into the fire. Because now the abuser is not only targeting your friend, because he refuses to leave your friend alone, so he's started stalking your friend, trying to get your friend to come back. But because you are helping your friend, the abuser is also now targeting you and being violent towards you. In really extreme cases, things can even come to a point where people are getting killed. They say, according to police statistics, 80% of homicides, that is murders that happen in cases of domestic violence, happen when a victim, when the survivor tries to leave or has left their abuser, has left the abusive relationship. 80% of the murders that happen in domestic violence situations happen after the victim has left their abuser, has left their abusive relationship. Why? Because for the abusers, this is an unacceptable thing. Remember, their primary motivation in the relationship, the primary motivation of the abuser in the relationship, is to exercise power and control, is to establish their dominance. And when their victim leaves, that power and control is being taken away from them, that dominance is being threatened. And they cannot bear that. And that is why it is very, very common that there's actually an escalation in the violence, in the abuse, in the aftermath of a survivor trying to leave or leaving the abusive relationship. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't advise your friend to leave. I'm not saying you shouldn't help your friend to leave their abusive partner or leave the abusive relationship. But I am saying that you need to really know what you're doing. You need to be aware of the issues, the risks, the dangers, so that you can act in ways so that you're not inadvertently causing more harm than good. So that you're not putting your friend more at risk, so that you're not putting yourself more at risk as you try to help your friend. And this is just one example. And I know this is a relatively extreme case or an extreme kind of outcome that can occur. So let me give you another example of where well-meaning advice from friends and family can actually end up creating more trouble for survivors and victims of domestic violence. I've seen this also happen a lot, where a survivor will come to their friends and family and tell them about the troubles that they're having. And their friends do not recognize that what their friend is describing, what the victim, what the survivor is describing is in fact abusive behavior. That what they're describing as the state of their relationship is demonstrating or showing or indicating that there's a cycle of violence in the relationship. That there's in fact that this is a relationship where domestic violence and abuse is existing. And so the friends will give advice to the survivor to resolve their conflict, just as you may resolve any normal kind of conflict. So for example, you may tell the survivor, the friends and family members may tell the survivor to be patient, to be to be willing to compromise. If the other person is not willing to listen or is angry, that you stay cool, that you show greater patience, that you have more empathy, more compassion, that you just kind of give in to what they're saying until they've calmed down, and then you can talk to them more calmly about how you're feeling and what you're needing, and they'll see sense, and then they'll respond much better to you. Now, this is in general pretty good advice, but the problem is that in an abusive relationship, the abusive partner is not interested in compromising. The abusive partner is not interested in what you want, is not interested in how the other person feels as a result of their choices, as a result of their behaviors. Except insofar as they can use their knowledge of how the other person feels to manipulate them, to control them. Because the primary motivation for the abuser in behaving the way that they do is to establish their dominance in the relationship, is to exercise power and control over their partner. So it doesn't matter how patient you are, it doesn't matter how much you compromise, how much you try to give them some time to cool down. The abusive partner is not going to get to a place where they become more compassionate and more caring and more willing to listen to your perspective and accommodate your needs and your feelings and your wants. In fact, what happens in abusive relationships is that the more you give in, the more patient you are, the more accommodating, more compromising you are, the more permission you are giving the abuser to continue to treat you in that way. You are in fact proving through your behavior to the abuser that behaving with anger, behaving with aggression, making threats, or whatever else it is that they're doing to control you, in the face of which you are backing down and compromising, you're showing with your behavior that those tactics, those techniques, those strategies are effective in allowing that abuser to control you. And so not only are they going to continue to use those strategies and tactics and those behaviors, over time they will intensify the use of those strategies and tactics and behaviors so that they become more aggressive, they become more violent. And you see, this is actually one of the signs. This is one of the ways you can differentiate between normal relationships and abusive relationships. Is that in abusive relationships, there's this pattern, this cycle of violence. It's not just that there's conflict once in a while, and then it goes away, and you sort of get back to a place of normal in your life because you have managed to deal with the conflict or put it away, or just kind of allowed yourself to let go of it effectively. In abusive relationships, it's a cycle of violence that intensifies over time. So the abusive behavior happens more and more frequently, and it becomes more and more intense over time. And one of the ways that the intensity is increasing is that usually in abusive relationships, the abuse in the beginning of the relationship is very low key and is generally like mental, emotional. But over time, it becomes more and more like obvious, more and more hurtful in the way that it is mentally and emotionally abusive. But then physical abuse begins. As the abusive relationship intensifies, the nature of abuse intensifies, physical abuse, physical violence is introduced into the relationship. And then the physical violence itself becomes more and more frequent, more and more intense. So when the first time, incident of physical violence happens, maybe, the abusive partner will just give you a slap or give you a push or something like that. But then they start to slap you more and more frequently, push you more and more frequently. Maybe then they go beyond just slapping or pushing to choking you or punching you or doing other kinds of even more intense, more hurtful, more harmful acts of violence against you. And so it doesn't matter how much your friends and family tell you to be patient, to be compromising. Being patient, being compromising may be effective as a strategy in the short term of helping you get through the moment of crisis. Like if for example, the abusive partner is all riled up and actually in that angry, violent mood, if you respond to them with assertiveness or you try to resist them in that moment, it may make them more angry, more violent. So in that moment, in the short term, it may actually be necessary for you to be submissive, to just do what they're saying, so that you don't end up aggravating the situation in that moment more than necessary and endangering yourself because of that, more than you already are in danger. But in the long term, This advice is not going to be sufficient. It's not going to be effective. It's not going to be helpful in reducing the abuse or removing the abuse from the relationship. So again, it comes down to you have to be educated. You have to know whether you're going to help yourself or whether you're going to help a loved one. You have to know what you're doing. You have to educate yourself about these issues. And let me remind you once again that whether you know it or you don't, you know people who are in abusive relationships. You know people who are doing the abusing. And it may very well be someone that you love and care about. Your neighbor, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, somebody you work with who is struggling with this. And if you are not educated, you are not aware, you'll miss the signs, you'll miss the red flags, you'll miss the warnings that could potentially protect yourself or protect your loved ones from getting into this kind of trouble in the first place, or that could help them or help yourself more effectively to get out of it if they're already in it or if you are already in it. So please take some time to educate yourself about this issue of domestic violence. Go online, Google domestic violence resources, Google domestic violence myths and realities, and you'll have many different websites, excellent websites that will come up. I want to particularly recommend the website of the organization that I work through, I volunteer with. It's called Peace Over Violence. That's the organization that I trained with to become a crisis counselor on their sexual assault and domestic violence hotline. So I really trust the quality of their training, the quality of the information that they provide. So just Google Peace Over Violence, or you can go directly to their website at peaceoverviolence.org and just learn about this issue of domestic violence, the myths and realities, how you can get help. And besides checking out the website or Googling for more information, if you want a more personal contact that can help you, that can guide you with this, you know that I'm also someone that you can reach out to. Just go to my website at academyofthriving.com, click on the Contact Us page, and you will see how you can connect with me. So until next time, I wish you lots of peace and joy.